My name is Mildred Thompson, and for 30 years I thought my father chose silence over me. The night before he vanished at sea, he said only one thing: "Some truths are too heavy to carry, Mildred. Let them sink." I spent half my life believing he meant me, that I was the burden he left behind. But last week, while cleaning out his navy trunk, I found a faded receipt that said, "When the fog clears, come find the light." And in that moment, I realized maybe my father didn't run from the truth. Maybe he left it for me to find. The rain had been falling since morning, a slow, steady whisper against the roof of my mother's old house. I could still smell the cedar she used to polish the furniture with faint beneath the must of years gone by. After the funeral, I told myself I'd only come back to pack what was left, but the silence of that house had other plans for me. Everything was coated in a thin film of dust. The framed photograph of my father in his Navy uniform, the pocket watch that had stopped ticking at 11:47, the worn Bible left open to a page that read, "The sea will reveal what the shore cannot." I stared at the words for a long time, then climbed the narrow steps to the attic. The air was thick and cold, smelling of salt and rust. In the far corner sat the trunk I hadn't seen in decades, its brass latch dulled with age. I knelt, brushed my hand across the lid, and opened it. The creak echoed like a breath. Inside were medals, a small logbook, and a faded receipt from Harbor Light Cafe, Boothbay Harbor, Maine. The date, September 13th, 1981. The day he left home for the last time. On the back, in faint blue ink, "When the fog clears, come find the light." It wasn't his handwriting. It wasn't hers either. I didn't know why, but something in me stirred. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, I whispered to no one in particular, "If the fog clears, maybe I'll see him again." And in that moment, I knew the fog was waiting for me. Fog rolled over Boothbay Harbor like a slow tide, soft and heavy, swallowing the color from everything it touched. When I pulled over by the pier, the Harbor Light Cafe looked almost like a memory. White paint faded the sign, crooked the smell of salt and diesel lingering in the air. The bell above the door gave a tired jingle as I stepped inside. Warm light glowed from low-hanging lamps, brushing against wooden tables scarred by years of conversation. The scent of strong coffee and baked apples filled the air, sweet and sharp, and for a moment it felt like walking into my childhood again. My mother once said my father always stopped here before he sailed out. Something about the way the sea smelled near this place made him feel closer to home. Behind the counter stood an older woman with silver hair tied back in a bun. She looked up as I approached, a towel still in her hands. When I reached into my bag and slid the faded receipt across the counter, she froze mid-motion, her gaze fixed on the faint blue handwriting. It took her a long breath before she spoke. "It's been 30 years since anyone showed me that." I swallowed hard. "You wrote this, didn't you?" Her eyes softened, sad and knowing. "Yes. Your father asked me to." The air between us stilled. I felt my pulse hammer in my throat. "He's been gone since '91, I said quietly. "I know," she murmured. "But he left this for you. Said you'd come when the fog clears." She opened an old cabinet beneath the register and drew out a yellowed envelope, sealed but fragile with age. Written on the corner in trembling pen strokes. "For MT if she ever asks." I reached out to take it, my hands shaking as if the paper itself carried the weight of 30 years waiting to be answered. By afternoon, the fog had thinned, letting streaks of amber light filter through the cafe windows. I sat at the corner table, the envelope before me. My coffee had gone cold. I tore the seal slowly. Inside was a thin sheet of paper, creased, the ink blurred at the edges, but still legible. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, deliberate, the way he wrote his orders. "If the sea keeps my truth longer than I can look for the light, some things sink because they must be hidden, others because they must be found again." I read the words twice, my throat tight, the meaning hovering just beyond reach. Beneath the letter was a small Polaroid, my father, younger in uniform, standing beside a smiling officer holding a coffee cup. On the back, in a hurried scrawl, USS Milton, Sept. 1991. I pulled out my phone and typed the name written there, Lieutenant Paul Kernan. The search results appeared instantly: CEO, North Star Maritime Logistics. a defense contractor headquartered in Boston. My chest tightened. I remembered his face from the funeral. He was the one who'd called my father a man of principle. If he served under my father, why did the letter lead me here? Why the light? Why now? Nora came over with a fresh cup of coffee, steam curling between us. He used to drink it black. No sugar, she said. So do I. I answered, barely hearing my own voice. Did he ever say why he left this note? She looked toward the window where the fog outside was lifting into pale sunlight. He said one day, you'd need to know what really happened that night. My heart caught. What happened? Nora's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Something that shouldn't have sailed, she said softly and walked away, leaving me staring into the dark swirl of my coffee, wondering what exactly my father had tried to keep from the sea. 3 weeks had passed since Boothbay and Bangor felt colder than I remembered. Rain hadn't stopped for days, the kind that seeps into your coat and bones. I sat at my desk in the Veterans Affairs office, surrounded by stacks of folders and the faint bitterness of stale coffee. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead matched the low ache in my chest. I typed my father's file number into the archive system. The screen blinked once, then flashed red. Access restricted level 5, clearance required. My pulse jumped. I tried another route through the system, one only long-timers knew, Archive 91 M. Thompson Herald. The file appeared half the text hidden behind thick black bars labeled classified. I scrolled down, catching fragments, cargo clearance requested, objection filed by Captain Thompson, override approved by Lieutenant P. Kernan. I printed a copy, the machine whirring softly as the first sheet slid out. That's when I noticed a line written in the margin, a faint note scrawled by hand, see defense contractor, North Star for details. My stomach tightened, or Star Paul Kernan's company. I filed a formal FOIA request for the unredacted report, and using an old secure line, reached out to a friend who still worked in the Navy Records Division. His reply came hours later, short and sharp. Don't push this, Millie. Some reports were sealed under private contract clause. You touch them, they'll touch you. The words left a chill deeper than the rain outside. Still, fear only made me surer. Someone wanted this file forgotten. As I flipped through the printed pages again, something caught my eye. A small yellow note stuck to the back, nearly missed. The handwriting was hurried. He filed the objection at 2200. Reported hazardous cargo on board. Beneath it, 2 shaky initials. BF. I went to the trunk that night, to my father's old address book, pages yellowed and soft from use. The name was there in faded ink, Robert Bobby Flynn. By nightfall, I was on the road, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Edgecombe was quiet, the streets empty. When I pulled up to a small house by the docks, the porch light flickered weakly over a rusted sign that read, Veteran lives here. I hesitated, then knocked. After a pause, a gravelly voice came from inside, rough as sandpaper. You found the fog, huh? My breath caught in my throat. He knew I'd come. The inside of Bobby Flynn's house smelled of old wood salt and black coffee. Every wall was lined with photographs, ships, cruise medals, and the blue-gray eyes of men who looked too young to be lost. He moved slowly, but with purpose, setting down 2 steaming mugs on the table between us. I served under your father on the Milton, he said finally. Hard man, fair man. I slid the printed report across to him. He adjusted his glasses, squinting at the blurred lines and redacted text. Did you see this cargo, I asked? He let out a dry laugh. Saw it, smelled it. That wasn't any equipment we were told about. He leaned back, eyes distant. A few days before the Milton left port, your father found sealed crates loaded after dark. No manifests, no inspection papers. He refused to sign off. Kernan, then just his deputy, told him the cargo was part of a defense shipment. Your father asked, then why are civilians loading it? Flynn's voice cracked. He rubbed his forehead. After the explosion, 4 of us made it out. They brought us home, signed us into hospitals, and then came the men with the suits. They made us sign NDAs. National security, they said. But security for who? Not for us. I asked him why he hadn't spoken up. He looked at me, eyes red. Because every time I tried, someone in uniform knocked on my door. When I stood to leave, he gripped my wrist and pressed a damp scrap of paper into my hand. His fingers trembled. "Your father wasn't wrong," he whispered. "Look under the name North Star Contract Blue file." Outside rain came down in slanted sheets. Through the rearview mirror, his porch light blinked once, twice, then went dark. The next morning, I drove back. The house was surrounded by yellow tape. The door hung open. A young officer told me the place had been broken into. Old man fell down the stairs. I stared at the porch steps, at the muddy footprints leading away from the door, not toward it. In my pocket, the note he'd given me was soaked through, the ink bleeding into the paper. 3 words, still legible: cargo. Civilians. Kernan. I closed my hand around it and whispered to myself, if the sea kept my father's truth, someone made sure it stayed buried. Outside rain blurred the world to gray, and for the first time I understood how silence could kill faster than the sea. Winter settled heavy over Bangor snow, piling against the windows, wind howling like something alive. I sat at my desk, surrounded by files and notes. North Star Cargo Kernan NDA, each word circled in red. When the phone rang, I let it echo through the house before answering. A man's rough voice came through the line, low and cold. "Stop digging, or you'll join him beneath the waves." The click that followed cut deeper than the words. 2 nights later, a black SUV appeared outside, engine off, light glowing inside. It came back again and again, leaving only when I stepped outside. The police called it probably nothing. Fear burned into resolve. I drove through the snow to Boothbay Harbor. Inside Harbor Light, Nora brewed coffee like nothing had changed. She said he'd come there the night before his ship sailed, didn't drink, just stared at the light until dawn. Then she added, "If they ask, tell my daughter it wasn't the sea." I told her about Bobby Flynn's note. She disappeared to the back and returned with a small music box. "He left this. Said you'd know when to open it." I wound it, heard the soft tune and a faint rattle beneath. Inside the base was a mini-disc. Later at the Naval Library, I heard it play, my father's voice steady and clear. "Refuse to sign. This isn't transport, it's evidence. Then Kernan's, you'll sink us all." The recording ended. Proof. As I walked to my car, a man watched me from across the lot. He turned away, vanishing into the snow. On my windshield, a note. "Truth has a price," I whispered into the cold. So does silence. The wind off Portland Harbor cut through my coat as I joined the crowd gathered for the USS Milton Memorial. Kernan stood at the podium, voice smooth, rehearsed. "We honor the brave who gave their lives to the sea." A young officer approached, saying Kernan wanted to meet me afterward. His eyes carried pity I didn't want. I nodded, clutching my bag tight around the mini-disc. While he spoke, I checked the file on my phone. A small chime rang, Bluetooth connected. My father's voice filled the speakers. "Refuse to sign. This isn't transport, it's evidence." Then Kernan's desperate reply. The crowd froze. Nora's hands flew to her mouth. Veterans whispered, "That's Thompson's voice." Kernan paled, forced a smile, muttered something about interference, but the damage was done. The truth was out. Later, in a small room behind the stage, Kernan's glare cut through me. "You don't know what you've started." I met his eyes. Neither did my father. But he finished it. He turned to leave, voice fading. "The Navy won't thank you for this," I said softly. "I'm not doing it for them." The Navy Tribunal in Portland gleamed like ice-glass walls, silver microphones, a table stacked with files thick enough to bury a lifetime. 1 month had passed since the memorial, and the whole country was watching the hearing that reopened a 30-year-old case. I sat in the witness seat, heart pounding, the recording clutched tight in my hands. Behind me, Nora held my father's old porcelain mug, her fingers trembling around it, as if it were his hand. Across the table, the board of 3 officers waited. Opposite me sat Kernan, thinner now, but his arrogance still intact. "Ms. Thompson, you claim new evidence exists." "Yes, sir?" My father's voice. The tape played, filling the room with ghosts. "Refuse to sign. This isn't transport, it's evidence." Then Kernan's reply. "You'll sink us all." He smirked. "Digital manipulation." I nodded to Nora. She stood and handed over the second disc. The playback was clear, brutal. "If Thompson talks, we'll all drown. Delete the objection. He won't make it to shore." Someone whispered, "That's your voice, Mr. Kernan." He shot up shouting. He was too rigid. The shipment was meant to end a war. I met his gaze. He saw lives. You saw leverage. The gavel struck. Captain Harold Thompson's honor reinstated. Outside, a reporter asked what my father would say today. I smiled faintly. He'd tell me to polish my boots and get back to work. Behind me, Nora's soft voice carried through the wind. He'd be proud, honey. Spring came softly to Maine. The snow was gone, leaving only thin mist curling above the harbor and the faint scent of salt in the air. At the Veterans Center, rows of folding chairs filled the small courtyard, every seat occupied by faces lined with years and memory. The colors of old uniforms mixed with the gray of the sea beyond. When the flag was raised, the crowd stood. A Navy officer stepped forward, voice clear against the wind. By order of the Navy Board, Captain Harold Thompson is hereby reinstated with full honors. Applause rose low and reverent. The new memorial stone gleamed under the pale sunlight, service with honor, carved deep in granite. For a moment, the world felt still. My father's name no longer whispered, but spoken aloud again, without shame. After the ceremony, I turned and saw Kernan standing alone at the edge of the crowd. No entourage, no bodyguards. Just a man in a gray coat, looking older than his years. He approached slowly and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside is the original incident report, he said. The unedited one. I kept it all these years. Why now, I asked. He met my eyes. Because your father didn't deserve silence, and neither did I. I tore the seal and unfolded the pages. At the bottom, my father's handwriting, firm and deliberate, refused to authorize life before loyalty. My voice shook. You're too late to apologize. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said quietly. I'm asking you to tell the story right. He turned and walked away. Before leaving, he pulled the old Navy pin from his lapel and dropped it into the veteran's donation box. The metal clinked softly in ending, and perhaps a release. Weeks later, Nora renamed the cafe the Light Room. The walls glowed with photos of sailors and their families, handwritten notes pinned between them. Tell your story before it sinks. Every table was full, the air thick with laughter and shared silence. I stood near the window, watching the light spill across the faces inside, and finally understood. This warmth, this truth, this forgiveness was the light my father wanted me to find. Late summer settled over Boothbay Harbor in soft gold. The air was warm, touched with the scent of salt and pine. Outside the cafe windows, sunlight rippled on the water gulls, tracing lazy circles over the bay. Inside the light room, the murmur of conversation mixed with the low hum of music. The place had grown into something larger than a cafe, part sanctuary, part memorial. I sat by the window, the afternoon light spilling across my notebook as I wrote the final line of my book. When the fog clears, truth always finds the shore. The words looked simple on the page, yet every letter felt like a piece of something long carried and finally set down. Nora came over with 2 cups of coffee, steam curling gently between us. She set one in front of me, her smile soft. For him, she said. I looked at the cup, at the way the light caught the surface, shimmering like the sea. He'd probably say it's too cold, I murmured. And she laughed, a warm, quiet sound that filled the space between us. Across the room, the photo of my father hung above the mantel, him in uniform standing on the deck of a ship, eyes fixed somewhere past the horizon. For the first time, his expression didn't look distant to me. It looked peaceful. I closed my notebook and slipped the pen inside. The cafe door chimed as I stepped out into the sun. The boardwalk stretched ahead, the wood warm beneath my hands as I leaned on the railing. Waves lapped gently against the posts. I reached into my coat pocket and drew out the receipt edges, soft. The ink faded but still legible. When the fog clears, come, find the light. The lighthouse stood silent at the edge of the pier. Its beam idle in the daylight. I walked toward it, each step echoing faintly over the water. Beneath the light, beside the new memorial stone bearing his name, I placed the receipt. The wind caught the edge fluttering at once before it settled flat against the granite. The sun dipped low, washing the harbor in gold. I stared at the reflection in the water. 2 silhouettes side by side, mine and his blurred, together by the shimmer of light. I came back, Dad, I whispered, and I found it. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of waves, and the faint chime of a piano melody, the same tune from his old music box, gentle and steady, like the sea itself remembering. The flag above the lighthouse stirred, catching one last breath of sunlight, before the evening came. And for the first time in 3 decades, I felt him there, not lost to the sea, but finally home.